What if I told you that you can now own a camera that looks like it was built during the film era but has all the technology you need for the digital age? Check out the all-new Nikon Zfc. What's up guys, my name is Ryan and today we're here in beautiful Haji Lane and I'll be giving you guys a review and thoughts of my view on the Nikon's new APS-C format mirrorless camera, the Zfc. As always, I'll be running you guys through my thoughts and opinions and how I use it, as well as taking it out in the real world to do some tests. And just take note that this review is not sponsored by Nikon, so my thoughts will only be my personal opinion and I'll be sharing with you guys the pros and cons of what I think about this beautiful looking camera. So just running through an overview of what I think so far. Just looking at it, it's very stunning, very aesthetically pleasing, and you can tell that it might be a little bit difficult to differentiate this camera from a film camera because it has all the similarities like the mechanical dials and obviously the color and the body build. But let's take a look at the design and its specifications of what this tiny camera has. Alright, let's talk about design of this camera. So as I've mentioned before, it is an APS-C format mirrorless camera. So it's using a APS-C CMOS sensor, which means that if you're attaching a full frame lens to it, it has a 1.5 times crop. But other than that, you can see there's a lot of similarities from a natural Nikon film camera because this model is actually redesigned and remodeled after the classic FM2. So if you guys are familiar with film cameras, I'm sure that picking this one up will be very easy to use and it gives you a sense of nostalgia, especially for me when I'm using it. But let's take a look at the top plate of this camera. So you have the mechanical dials, very similar to a film camera. You have your ISO, shutter speed, and all of your naturally recording button, shutter button, and stuff like that. So my favorite feature so far while using this camera has got to be the 3-inch LCD touchscreen, which is fully articulating. So it's very useful for people that want to take selfies and do vlogs. Other than that, I want to say that the camera has been built out very simply. It doesn't have too many menus and the buttons are laid out very simply for you. So I would recommend if you're a beginner, this is a good camera to start with. But for someone that uses many different cameras in the past, I want to say that picking this up was really a breeze for me to use. Other than that, you have the battery slot at the bottom and it also contains only one SD card slot. This camera also uses a Z mount, which means that Nikon users that have previous Z mount lenses will be able to fully utilize them on this camera. So even though this camera is an APS-C format mirrorless camera, I have to say that some of the features and specs that this camera has, not even a lot of professional cameras out there have. So let me just go through some of the specifications that it has. So obviously this camera can shoot RAW and JPEG for photos and it is a 21 megapixels. One thing that I mentioned before is obviously it's a crop sensor, so it is a 1.5 times crop. So for example, if I'm using, what I have right now is a 28 f2.8. So with a 1.5 times crop, it's around approximately 42 millimeters. Other than that, it has a lot of recording functions. So you have your manual, auto, aperture priority, shutter priority, stuff like that. So let's talk about video. So for video, this camera can shoot an impressive 4K at 25 frames per second and also 1080p Full HD at 100 frames per second. So even my professional camera cannot actually do that. So I'm very interested to see how this would stand up against some of the professional cameras. And I just have to say that I understand how Nikon is targeting this camera and they're using it to its design and aesthetic to target users that are more casual and everyday. So like people that just want to bring this out and capture like moments and memories. This is a very good camera for that. One thing that I found really interesting that this camera has that some other models don't exactly have is the 20 creative picture profile. So in the real world test, I'll actually be going through some of these functions to show you guys how they work. But right off the top of my head right now, I have to say that for users that are interested in just getting your pictures instantaneously, you can go through the picture profile settings and edit your photos within the camera without even having any post-processing. Another thing to take note is that the camera does not have any in-body image stabilization. So if you're shooting videos, make sure to use a tripod or a gimbal. But if you're shooting photos, I'm sure it's no problem. One thing I want to mention also, to supplement on top of the no image stabilization, is that this camera is very good in low lights settings. And what I mean by that is that the ISO is set, you can set the ISO from 100 all the way to an impressive 51,200. So we'll also be focusing more about that during the real world test later on. Okay guys, so right now we'll be taking the camera out and doing some real world tests, and the reason why I have a mask on is because we have COVID-19 now in Singapore, and just to be safe during this period, we'll be keeping my mask on, and I'm sure you guys can still hear me clearly. So without further ado, let's take a walk. So just walking, I'll be explaining you guys about my experience with the autofocus of this camera. The autofocus of this camera is really interesting because they have two different functions. You have eye animal autofocus, which is interesting because this is a capability that's not exactly incorporated into a lot of cameras. I have a cat at home and I've tested this out on Oreo, my cat, and I have to say that the autofocus is very, very accurate, even in low light conditions. As expected, obviously when you're shooting humans as well, you have the same capability, super quick autofocus and very, very accurate. The more interesting thing that I wanted to show you guys is the creative picture controls and how to actually use them. So I'm just going to take a few photos and later on I'll show you how do you actually execute the creative picture controls. Okay, so I will be showing you guys how I use the creative picture controls within the camera. So what you want to do before you start shooting is to go into the menu, and under the set picture control, you can select a variety of different color presets, if you may. So let me just choose one where I think is perfect for the street. Okay, one thing that I wanted to mention about this camera is that it has an impressive frame rate of up to 11 frames per second when you're shooting photos. So I'll just show you guys what that sounds like right now. So just shooting the street, have a listen, and that impressive shutter speed. So continuing from my picture profile, I just want to show you guys what the image looks like. So just taking a look at this picture, obviously this isn't exactly how you look through your eyes, but the camera is putting a preset over your picture, and I have to say I'm really liking this image right now. It saves me a lot of time from having to do it post-processing in Lightroom or Photoshop. But obviously you can have a wide variety of other color picture profiles that you can choose from, such as morning, you have pop, you have Sunday, and even black and white. So another interesting feature that the Zfc has is that it has a wireless connection to the SnapBridge app from Nikon. So understanding, like the creative picture controls and stuff like that, and having to be able to instantaneously transfer your photos through an app, I can understand that Nikon is trying to target people that want to share their content instantaneously without having to go through the hassle of post-processing, such as Lightroom or Photoshop. So I'll just show you guys how to connect through the app on my iPhone. So you have to go through your settings, and under connect to smart device, all you have to do is start pairing, and it will automatically link onto your phone. And just like that, you can download your photos immediately on your phone and share it to social media or your friends. Super quick and super simple. So as I've mentioned before, the camera has amazing low light capabilities. So obviously right now it's a little bit bright outside. So we've come to a little area which is a lot shadier than the outside. I just want to show you guys that using the higher ISO settings, what you can do with this camera in low light settings. So just taking a look at the photos actually look really crisp and clean. However, obviously when you're using high ISO settings, it comes with a cost. So you're gonna get a lot of noise in your images, but do take note, this is not only exclusive for the Zfc. When you're using other cameras, setting at an high ISO would always result in more noise in your images. So after the real-world test, let me just explain to you guys my thoughts and personal opinions about the test we've done so far. I actually really enjoyed having the SnapBridge app and that capability to immediately transfer your photos after just shooting it on the spot. In terms of ISO, the functions are really amazing in such a sense that you can expand all the way up to 51,200 ISO, which is something that I haven't seen a lot in many other professional or even digital consumer cameras out there. In terms of the autofocus, so far using it for a week or so, I haven't had any issues with it. And even in low light conditions, the autofocus is very quick and it's very accurate. But apart from that, it's quite difficult to find any fault with this camera so far. And do take note that I'm only giving my thoughts and opinions from a consumer standpoint for which this camera is made for. So I know that I shoot professionally, but this camera is not made for that. So I just want you guys to take note that the things that I mentioned about using this camera is focused on people that are using it as a weekend camera or just something that you want to bring out to document your experiences with your friends. So let's talk flexibility about this camera. It has a 1/4 inch thread at the bottom, so you can attach like a monopod or a tripod for people that want to take vlogs and selfies and doing long exposure. You can definitely do that with this camera. And other than that, I have to say that one thing I'm really a fan of is the ability to actually charge your camera via USB-C on the side. So the battery life of this camera can last up to 300 images, and that's I'm sure it's for RAW, because so far I've been using the camera only on JPEG, and the reason for that is because this camera is so new that the decoding capabilities is not even available on Mac and PC yet. So I'm unable to actually give you guys my opinion on how the RAW file performs. But just jumping back into the battery life, the camera can withstand up to a 75-minute video performance. And obviously, apart from all of that, let's say you run out with battery just trying to shoot your day outside and you have a long day traveling, you can always have an external power bank and recharge your camera through USB-C, and while doing that you can even operate your camera on the go. So that's a function that I think a lot of people would find very handy. And I'm sure a lot of you guys would be interested to know, apart from the exterior and all its capabilities, how the image quality is like. I have to say that the image quality, being at 21 megapixels, obviously it's not going to be exactly very high resolution, but for people that are using it for social media, it's well within the range of having clarity to upload your images on Instagram, on Facebook, and even your videos on YouTube. So the videos, you have two different file formats that you can record on. You can record on MP4 and H.264 MOV, which is a capability that I haven't seen a lot in mirrorless consumer DSLR cameras. Another thing I want to point out is that since this camera is remodeled after film cameras, you have mechanical dials on the top. And obviously you can control for example, you can control the shutter speed through the command dial at the back. But this is really interesting. If you set the mechanical dial to any number along your setting at the top, let's just say I set it to 1/250th of a second, you will be unable to control the shutter speed on the command dial at the back unless you set it to 1/3 of the step. So I understand Nikon has used this way to control your shutter speed because it has the mechanical dial and also the command dial at the back. So in order to control only the shutter speed through the command dial, you have to make sure that you set it to a 1/3 step. Otherwise, your mechanical dial will override the settings. So in terms of image quality, so just picking up from where I left off just now, 21 megapixels, the bokeh on the f2.8 28mm is really creamy. However, I have one thing that I want to point out about this lens is that the bokeh is really nice. You get very shallow depth of field. However, the color roll-off in the bokeh is not exactly the cleanest. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're shooting an image of a flower and in the background you have leaves. The leaf edges will still be very much obvious when you zoom in, but this is only when you're really picky with your photos and you're zooming in like 200 times. But for people that are posting it on social media, I'm sure nobody's going to zoom in and look at your bokeh. So definitely not something to worry about. But other than that, I'm very happy with the way that Nikon has handled its JPEG colors. Unfortunately, I'm unable to tell you guys how I feel about the RAW, as I've mentioned before. But the color so far, shooting on the standard color profile, is very true to eye, very rich in color, and something that I really enjoy. So after taking a look at all the capabilities of this camera, I'm sure a lot of you guys are wondering how much this camera would actually cost. So the body alone would set you back at $8,549, and there are two kit lenses that are available that you can choose from. So the 16 to 50mm f3.5 to 6.3 will cost you $1,779, and the kit lens that I have right now with me, the 28 f2.8, will set you back at $1,929. So what are my personal opinions on this camera? Let's talk about the pros and then I'll focus on the cons. So I have to be honest with you guys, this is actually my first time using a Nikon system, and just picking this camera up, being a first-time user, it's very easy and user-friendly. The buttons are not placed out in any way that's too difficult for you to manage, and the mechanical dials on the top definitely help speeding up my efficiency when I'm working with this camera. Other than that, the tilty flippy screen, which is my favorite feature of this camera so far, has been tremendously useful for me in shooting street and shooting architecture. Apart from that, also having the capability to immediately edit your photos within the camera is something that I found really useful, because sometimes, you know, you don't want to have to go through all the post-processing and editing your photos on your computer, and you just want to get your images straight out of the camera. And the good thing is that you also have the SnapBridge app. So first and foremost, we are done with the pros. Let's focus on the cons. So just like every camera, there's definitely cons to it, and I'm sure that there won't be any camera that's perfect for every user out there. So these are my personal opinions on what I find that's missing in the Nikon Zfc. Firstly, you don't actually have a headphone jack on the camera. So if you want to monitor your audio levels, it is quite difficult to do so. And it has a speaker, but obviously if you're not using a headphones, monitoring the audio won't be as accurate as just listening through your headphones. Secondly, even though the camera looks very, very aesthetically pleasing, however, ergonomically it does not have a grip. So this was, first time using it, it was a little bit weird for me to hold the camera because I'm not used to holding it flat like this. And the reason why this might not be ideal for some people out there is that if you want to shoot single-handedly and you have a lens that is attached to it, much bigger than what I have right now, it might be difficult for you to balance your camera. So for people that want to do vlogs single-handedly or taking selfies, this is less than ideal, so I definitely recommend a strap if you're going to purchase this camera. But honestly, those are the only two things that I found missing on this camera. Other than that, I have been very happy with using it so far, trying to capture my everyday life. And as a weekend camera, I think it is perfect for a lot of you guys. So in my opinion, who would appreciate and buy a camera like this? If you are a casual user and you want to use it for vlogging and selfies, definitely perfect for you. If you're also a beginner, I would recommend using this camera as someone that's using it for the first time. Very simple to use, very easy menu to navigate through. And yeah, I think that's it so far for the Nikon Zfc. I hope you guys enjoyed our review of the Nikon Zfc, and if you have any comments, make sure to leave them down in the comment section down below on what you like and what you don't like about the Nikon Zfc. As always, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and all our various social media platforms. And if you haven't already, also follow me at Ryan Mamba on my Instagram. And I hope you guys enjoyed this Ryan Mamba's perspective, and I'll see you guys in the next one.